Long before ancient empires and modern governments were the legends of deities who, much like civilizations to follow, were rising to power and overthrowing their predecessors. Known as the Olympians, a group of powerful gods and goddesses gained control over the infamous 10-year-long War of the Gods, in which Zeus led his siblings to overthrow the previous generation of ruling gods, the Titans. As the legend goes, having won the battle, they exiled the Titans to Tartarus and took up home on Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece, which is how they got their name. Let's dive into the 12-ish formidable gods that make up the Olympians. You'll find out why we say ish if you make it to the end of this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a beat on all things of legends. Zeus, the king of gods. Arguably one of the most powerful gods in existence, and is likely the most well-known of all the Greek gods, depending on who you ask. His story is one that is frequently told in modern society, games, movies, literature, and beyond. Zeus shares many traits with gods of other cultures. His counterpart from the Roman account of these stories is Jupiter. You could also find references to Dionysus from Rigvedic legends, but let's save those cross-cultural comparisons for another day. Associated with sky and thunder, Zeus is often depicted wielding a thunderbolt and is considered the ruler of the gods. After his victory in the war against the Titans, he became responsible for maintaining order and justice in the universe. However, all this responsibility didn't really stop him from escapades that stirred the pot amongst the gods. He honestly wreaked havoc on the mortal world too. There aren't a shortage of these stories. Comment if you want us to make a video about it. Even more disturbing was the exploitation of his power to disguise himself as something he simply wasn't, all in an effort to gain the adoration of the beautiful women of that time, both goddesses and mortals alike. Take his first wife, Hera, as an example. So this leads us to her. If Zeus was the king of the gods, then she was the queen of the gods. She was usually depicted as a beautiful woman wearing a crown and holding a royal scepter. In many pieces of artwork, she is seen illustrated with birds, specifically a cuckoo. This is possibly symbolic. In a world without social media, all they had were paintings, and so it's a little suspect, as it's said that her marriage to Zeus was a result of his guise as a cuckoo bird, transforming specifically to seduce her. And can we talk about the fact that she was seduced by a bird? Beloved queen or woman scorned, you decide, as it's hard to avoid the plagues of quiet violence that can often be found in her story. The most common tale you find of her is the role she played in the legends of Hercules and Dionysus. Her endless persecution of the favorite bastard sons of Zeus wasn't the only account of her vengeful acts. There are other tales of punishment, persecutions, and mortal meddlings, the most popular of which are possibly found in the historical writings of the Trojan War. Now, it might seem natural that all offsprings of the gods and goddesses of Olympia would become a part of the divine that oversaw the realm, but that wasn't quite how the cards panned out. In some legends, Zeus and Hera had 3 children, in other accounts, she mothered the 3 on her own. Whichever the case, only 2, Ares and Hephaestus, became known as a part of the 12 main gods of Olympia. Hephaestus' godly life was riddled with challenges. He was known as the god of fire, who at birth was thrown off Mount Olympus by his own mother, Hera. Some suggest that the reasoning behind her hateful acts stemmed from Hephaestus' disfigurement and congenital issues. A little bit of digging might shed some light into his disabilities. After all, it's very common knowledge by today's standards that incest can cause birth defects, and his parents, Zeus and Hera, were siblings. It wasn't just his mother who he had conflict with. His brother Ares also wronged him when Ares committed adultery with Aphrodite, Hephaestus' wife. As the Olympian god of war, Ares, unlike his brother, was often depicted as strong and manly, either young or mature. With cultural interpretations varying, some versions of his story overlap with his counterpart, Mars, the Roman god of war. With war as his symbol, the legends surrounding Ares, or Mars as some may refer to him, often revolve around bloody battles or vengeful pursuits. While Ares represents the violent and physical, untamed aspect of war, Athena, another one of the gods, represents military strategy and intelligence as the goddess of wisdom and strategy. The story we hear most about Athena is her involvement in the creation, exile, and ultimate beheading of Medusa. depending on which version is referenced, hero or villain, remember, there are two sides to every coin. But stories of Athena capture the imagination, making Athena one of the more widely referenced goddesses among the 12. While there are many legends surrounding Athena, the one most popular was her feud with Poseidon, the god of the seas, over the city of Athens and its surrounding territories. Zeus, attempting to avoid a war, declared that he would award the Greek city to the god or goddess who offered the most useful gift to the people. The contest took place on the Acropolis, where Athena defeated Poseidon by producing what is said to be the very first olive tree, which became a symbol for peace and reconciliation in Greek tradition. You've heard of the saying, extending the olive branch. As for Poseidon, legend has it he produced a horse or a stream, depending on what account of the story is referenced. Comment below which one you would have picked as the most useful gift for a new civilization. Personally, I think it would have been the horse, as it would have made travel so much more efficient. Poseidon was the god of the sea, who was often depicted with a trident. While he may resemble the father of a particular Disney character, in our recap of the legend, his story is definitely not rated for kids. At birth, Poseidon was swallowed whole by his father Kronos, and was later saved by his brother Zeus. Together with the rest of his siblings, he fought alongside Zeus in the 10-year War of the Gods, which eventually ended the Titan reign. It was actually during this war that he was given his famous trident by a Cyclops. After being awarded dominion over the seas, Poseidon went on to ruffle a few feathers, as legend has it. He challenged other gods for their domains, ravaged lands with his sea monsters, seduced and assaulted goddess and mortal women alike, and a few other things that may seem very ungodly. But remember, these were different times, and infidelity, war, and all sorts of misconduct were far more common. Luckily, our list of the 12 gods of Olympia isn't over yet, and we still have that 13th one to go over, so stay tuned and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a beat. Let's take a look at Hermes, best known as the Greek god of travel, amongst a long list of other things. Hermes was the herald and personal messenger to Zeus, but he was also the guide of the dead who led souls down into the underworld. If you've watched the Percy Jackson films, you might remember the flying shoes. That was Hollywood's depiction of Hermes' famous winged boots, one of the many traits this god has become famous for. As much of an angelic messenger as he's often depicted in the literary accounts of the gods, the Iliad and the Odyssey, Hermes is often characterized as a cunning thief. Not only was he known to poach valuables from both gods and mortals, he was also a bit of a heart stealer, seducing Aphrodite and eventually having a child with her. The legend of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and Hermes might sound unfamiliar, but that's because stories of Aphrodite's more famous love life with the god of war, Ares, and human Adonis largely overshadows this slightly less exciting relationship. After all, we humans really enjoy a good story, and let's face it, compared to her other affairs, this legend doesn't even begin to compare. Despite having only a few more popular tales of romance, Aphrodite had a knack for seducing and influencing gods and mortals alike. Her divine powers were said to be fertility, pleasure, and among many others, the uncanny ability to provoke desire. However, there was an exception to her abilities. According to the myths, Aphrodite's power cannot affect Athena, Artemis, and Hestia, as they're the only virgin goddesses and are immune to her influence. With her virginity giving her the ability to resist Aphrodite's influence, Artemis, the goddess of chastity, quickly got herself on Aphrodite's bad side. After all, by some accounts, Aphrodite was the goddess of love and beauty, while Artemis was the goddess of chastity and virginity, which seems to be the polar opposite of one another as defined powers go. While legends are rich with stories of Artemis, it's possible that her twin brother Apollo, whose name is more immediately referenced in recounts of the Olympians, has outshined Artemis with his own twisted legends. However, the two have some interesting similarities beyond their origins and their status. They are very similar in many ways. More predominantly, both are often depicted with a bow and arrow, and described as having a love for hunting and archery. Despite some accounts floating around the internet that these two had something to do with the evolution of the modern-day Cupid, most recollections of the legends in both Greek and Roman cultures cite Cupid to be the son of Aphrodite, so let's dive into that another day. Back to Apollo. Apollo was quite the god. In modern day, he may have even been considered a ladies' man. Every account of the legend of Apollo lists him as the god of, and then something different. In short, he was practically the god of everything, but was most recognized for being the god of music, poetry, archery, healing, and the sun. Interestingly, the original sun god was the titan Helios, but everyone forgot about him when Zeus and the gods kicked the titans to the curb. While Apollo's twin was his only full-blooded sibling, his father Zeus fathered many offsprings with other goddesses and mortals. Dionysus, the god of wine, was one of those offspring. While there aren't too many myths of him and Apollo in documented literature, one concept that is associated with these two gods was the concept of the Apollonian and Dionysian duality. Essentially, a type of universal balance, or a yin-yang so to speak. Nietzsche, an author and philosopher, defines the two as competing but also complementary impulses in Greek culture. The first refers to Apollo, the god of light and dream, and the second to Dionysus, the god of intoxication and rapture, which, according to Nietzsche, represents two fundamental forces of human nature. Rounding out the 12 gods is Demeter, the god of harvest. She's most famous not for any of her conquests, but rather for her favorite child, a daughter that later became the queen of the underworld. Did anyone tell her that she wasn't supposed to have favorites? Apparently not. Demeter had 7 children, all of whom were overshadowed by their sister, whose story resonated across Greek mythology, so much so that Demeter, the goddess of harvest herself, was also often depicted with or in association to Persephone after her birth, and not on her own. That leads us to the final goddess. With many different versions of the same legend, some recounts consider Hestia, the virgin goddess of home and hospitality, part of the main gods of Olympia, which would bring the total number of the originals to 13. However, in other accounts, she replaces Dionysus as one of the 12. Greek mythology is never consistent. This is possibly due to the simple fact that myths and legends that are passed down from generation through generation are affected by the cultures, the knowledge, the motives, and experiences of the people telling those stories. If only we had a mythological time machine to zip us back and get these 12 to clarify things for us. There's just so many open questions and interpretations. But before we get too far down the rabbit hole of mythical legends of the Olympians and the many tales that have sprung from this group of gods, we'll put a pin in it for another day. For now, please subscribe to our channel and join us on a journey of all things legends.